We're here at the Street Politics in the Age of Austerity conference at the Université de Montréal, and it's a pleasure of mine to be with Dr. Maria Kousis from the University of Crete, professor of sociology, who's going to share a bit with us about her research on the spatial dimension of the Greek anti-austerity movements. Professor Kousis, you've been mapping the spatial locations of the Greek anti-austerity movement. Can you tell us a bit about where these protests are taking place, the numbers of them, in which cities, and how it's been unfolding?
Okay, thanks. We have three basic spatial arenas of the anti-austerity campaign in Greece. From January, more precisely February 2010 to the present, there have been 34 large protest events. Our study for this presentation covers the 31 large defensive protests against austerity and neoliberal restructuring, imposed by transnational, for the most part, actors, which took place in Constitution Square, Syntagma, facing the Parliament. That is one level of the contention, but it simultaneously took place across the Greek cities and towns, especially in the squares and streets of, if we count the total number of events, we have events across more than 1,000 Greek cities, 1,000 events over the space of Greek cities and towns. Same repertoire. And one more, and there is another level that goes beyond the national arena. It is the transnational level, which this anti-austerity campaign has also been linked to.
Can you explain further what you mean by a defensive movement against austerity?
Well, defensive mobilizations began in the literature of social movements to appear in Latin American countries undergoing austerity policies. So there is a similar experience as in Latin American countries. They are defensive because they claim that their rights, labor rights and social welfare rights are annulled, abolished, and also because they are losing their jobs, incomes, and safety nets. And
is this largely being imposed from external sources, the Troika, or internal factors? Who are the protesters protesting against?
Well, the protesters demand they actually claim that there are unprecedented austerity and structural adjustment measures imposed on the Greek state by the Troika, and they really are against all the social, economic, and political impacts these measures and policies have. Actually, the claims are made towards the Greek state, who they consider responsible for all these developments. They consider the Greek government as the first target, and at the same time they understand that those policies are coming in through the Troika.
How have the protesters had an impact on the Greek political scene?
Okay. Now, they had, the protesters had impacted on the Greek political scene as follows. First, through economic voting. In the national elections of May 6 and June 17 of 2012, economic voting was very much reflected in the dramatic drop of the previous two ruling parties of the post-dictatorial period, especially PASOK, which ruled during the period of the crisis. And secondly, we see economic voting in the rise of the coalition of the left, Syriza, as well as Golden Dawn, the far-right party. We also see the drastic changes in the political scene. For example, a dismissal of 45 members of parliament from different parties only in the first half of 2012. We also have, during the 3-year crisis period, the formation of 6 new parties, and at the same time, during this crisis period, we have a dramatic drop of the level of trust in government from 25% to 7% within the 3-year period. We have, to a much more limited extent, seen the influence of the protests on Troika policies and measures. At different points, this has to be studied carefully, and the data set at hand is not developed to the extent that can give answers to this, but we can feel that at different points in time, these intense protests may have slowed down the speed of measures that were coming in Greece. However, most of the measures were passed. Now, again, this remains an unexplored issue and a very demanding one, and a very most challenging and interesting one to study.
Do you foresee the continuation of the protests?
Well, given the liquidity as well as rapid evolving of transnational and domestic opportunities and threats, it's not easy to predict how protest waves or campaigns will evolve in the future. At this time, the opposition party of the left is asking for elections. We know that in pre-election years, protests tend to increase. That may be an indicator, but we have to see what the transnational political landscape also, political and economic landscape also develops into.
Dr. Kousis, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.